You guys are my biggest fans. You come to all of my meetings, and I appreciate it tenfold. So we're basically here because the town has begun the process of updating their hazard mitigation plan. This is what the cover looks like. You can get it on the town website if you dive down deep into the flood mitigation section of the website. That's where my website is, and this is located there if you wanted to take a closer look. Or you come by my office and take a look at it anytime.
Nancy, I found it hard to find your section on the
I have
website.
too.
Oh, okay. So
Is it under government? Or?
yeah, if you go to the top line and then click on that second button, I think it is, and then it's departments, not not committees or commissions. So you look at departments and you scroll down the list and you see it's either flood hazard mitigation or hazard mitigation, but I think it's flood hazard mitigation. And that's the link to the website portion that I have control over. So this was completed in June of 2011. So it's a 5-year plan. We have to update it in order to continue to receive funds from FEMA. And so we have a very robust schedule, which VHB has been hired to work on this plan for us. Thank you. So I will introduce Peter Kuzlowski. I butchered it.
Kuzalita. However you want to say that.
I'm terrible. And Chelsea Glinka from VHB, who are going to be going through the presentation tonight and talking to you a little bit about what's entailing the update, as well as where you can put input today, as well as we'll have another public meeting at the end as we formulate the plan itself. And so without further ado, I'll let you guys take it on.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
What's VHB?
VHB is a firm. It's an engineering firm, actually. I'm the law engineer that had VHB.
I'm thinking Board of Health or something.
Same.
Just take a seat.
The company works in predominantly environmental engineering, transportation engineering, and land development. We have items, the security and emergency management, and so on. So I integrate on engineering projects. I also spend most of my time working on hazard mitigation plans and natural hazards and things of that nature.
Are you out of Boston?
My main office is in Watertown. The truth is, I work out of Honda.
We'll keep in touch.
I spend more time in my car than I do in any place job. My last car was 6 years old, had 240,000 miles on it. We're starting new. And Chelsea's out of our Providence office.
Yeah. So far,
Chelsea's an environmental biologist. And Chelsea works on a lot of the hazard mitigation. First of all, she has a great knack for research, and the hazard mitigation plans require good detailed research. So she's a huge help to me in that respect. So, as Nancy mentioned, the public meeting portion, this is the natural hazard mitigation plan. It's the only plan that FEMA has that requires a review, approval, and adoption process. In other words, there's no other, you can write your emergency management plan, it doesn't have to be approved by anybody outside your community. You can write your recovery plan, it doesn't have to be approved by anybody. The natural hazard mitigation plan has to be approved every 5 years through the FEMA process. In 2011, they changed the guidance. And when they changed the guidance, they changed the checklist that reviews the hazard mitigation plan. And the first 5 or 6 items in that checklist are now public involvement. How is the public given an opportunity to participate in the planning process? So FEMA takes it very seriously that the public gets involved and has an opportunity to comment. I know it's warm in here, so we're going to try to turn that on first. And then, so as I mentioned, mitigation plans are different from every other plan in that we're not looking for the next storm, we're not looking for the next event. We're looking long range, what can we do to address our hazards, the natural hazards that can affect us, and the vulnerabilities that we're exposed to. How can we reduce or eliminate that vulnerability? Save people, property, and the environment. It's a process, it's a set process that we go through. There's nuances to it. Organizing the resources really brings in getting all the town assets together, all the different boards, the commissions, the leaders of different departments, looking at the variety of plans. We don't want to duplicate planning effort, and we also don't want to write a plan that conflicts with any other plan that the town already has. So we want to make sure that it works for the towns. It won't be implementable if it doesn't work with the actions that the town's already taken. We're in the middle of assessing the risks. We use a variety, we look at historical risk. We use a variety of different modeling and mapping approaches to determine what the risk will be. It's not required in the local plans yet, but as of next March, state level plans are going to be required to address climate change in the plans. Say, oh yeah, good. Well, that's for anybody that's been working in the FEMA realm for a long time, that's a significant emotional event because in 2010, you weren't allowed to say climate change in the hazard mitigation plans. So now it's going to be a requirement. So we are addressing sea level rise and those impacts that will play a factor, especially here along the coast. And as we develop the risk assessment, we're going to categorize, and I'll show you in the next bit, the probability and the impact of the risk. Not that we're going to disregard any type of hazard or any vulnerability, but we're looking where you're going to focus your resources, so that we're not trying to spend money and expend resources across the board, that we can just focus on those items that are most likely to hurt us or do the most damage. Who's part of it? Everybody's part of it. There really isn't an element of the community that shouldn't be engaged in the hazard mitigation. Businesses should be, obviously the public, the government,
Community.
the adjacent communities, which is also another part of the FEMA requirement, is that we communicate with adjacent communities, because hazards don't stop at the border. If you had to do a large plan, large scale mitigation project, it's probably going to involve multiple communities, or you would want to extend it, depending on whether it's a landside community or another coastal community. We look at insurance companies. They don't usually come to the meetings, but insurance companies do great jobs doing assessments. They're a great asset for us to get into their stuff. Now, they're not going to tell me what your policy says, but I can go into their databases and I can look and see what, outside of flood insurance information is available anywhere for a flood. I can just go into the FEMA site, get flood insurance information. But for just typical losses, I can look at some of the assessments that the insurance companies might have done, especially on municipal buildings and municipal structures, if the town isn't self-insured, which is always an issue, especially here in Mass. Again, public provides the base for the planning partnership as it moves up to the planning team. The planning team is a small group of representatives from the community that take all that information and bring it all together to formulate the plan and the priorities. So just some of the hazards. The current plan only addressed a few hazards. It was kind of unique in that factor. I was actually a little surprised at some of the hazards that aren't included in the plan. So we want to make sure that we want to expand that. And these are the general hazards that we look at for my company when we're doing plans for the Northeast. And I'm from Melrose, by the way. I'm a North Shore kid, don't hold it against me.
We won't hold it against that.
Well, if it makes any difference, I live on the other side of Worcester now, so they disown me in Melrose too. But so, we look at the events that could possibly happen here, and then I try to align them to where they might, the hazard, likelihood, and the probability, and what they can then do. So, as I said, we're not going to ignore these hazards down in the bottom left, but we're going to focus on the ones that can do the most damage to us or are most likely to happen. Plan asset goals, objectives. We're going to talk about the goals in 2 minutes. Goals, objectives, and actions. This is again one of those few plans that the government has formula for that makes you take it all the way from strategic thought down to an actual act, putting it in place and having an implementation portion of it. We look at the mitigation measures that we're going to talk about from, basically we want to make sure that our infrastructure can support us. In a lot of cases, we're looking at stormwater there. We also want to make sure that our vulnerability for our power losses is minimized. Making sure sewage, wastewater, I'm not supposed to call it sewage anymore. Wastewater is not vulnerable, not likely to mix in with the potable water system because of flood. So we want to take a look at that. We want to look at, in this, I know the Situate's doing this, using the natural resources of the community to bolster your resiliency from natural hazards. Regenerating the beaches, stronger salt marshes, just instead of, dredging and moving stuff, letting them be what they are so that they can help support the community, help minimize the amount of impact that a storm might have. Regulatory changes, the cheapest mitigation action there is the zoning rule, but it's also not always the best. So, it's easy to pass a zoning ordinance, easier to pass a zoning ordinance and get a few $1 million to do some project, but it's not always the perfect idea. So some communities in the country have tried to ordinance their way out of vulnerability and found that it's not a really suitable solution. And education and training, one of the things we talked about at the last committee meeting, the one lesson learned that we've kind of stolen from the fire service is that if we can teach kids in school about mitigation and hazards and resiliency, and they take the fire department does this, they go into the elementary schools, they teach kids about fire safety, and they go home and they, hey, how come we don't have, Mom, how come we don't have a fire safety plan? Where's our rally point? We found that we can use that same thing to some extent with emergency management and mitigation. We can teach kids about, the resiliency, how it's not just, this mystic thing that we don't understand, so we can bring it in and get some education with families. As I mentioned, we're going to look at every other plan we have in the community that might tie into this. Comprehensive plans, sustainability plans, we've been looking at the sea level rise study that was done for the region. We've had, we have so many lists. There's so many different plans that we have to overlay and make sure that we're going to have to eliminate some conflicts between plans. Because when one plan is written versus another, we may have different information.
Yeah, that's also one of the recommendations that came out of the workshops as well, is that we need to do a better job of making sure that our plans overlap and that they be like
mutually supporting.
Yeah.
And they really should. It should be a story that unfolds.
Could you just tell them again why this particular plan is important for the town of Situate?
Well, and I mentioned it's required. Well, why is it required? For disaster funding. If you have a storm and you don't have an approved and adopted plan, the requirements are an approved and adopted hazard mitigation plan and participation in the National Flood Insurance Program in order to be eligible for post-disaster mitigation. So you would lose the opportunity. I know the town has received a significant amount, or is spending more post-disaster mitigation plans.
We have about $12 million in the queue right now with FEMA from Sandy, Nemo, and Juno. So we can anticipate that coming, but if we don't have an updated plan after June 2016, then we are no longer available for those funds without the plan in place. So this plan, above all things that we do, is probably the most important thing for a town like Situate, who has the kinds of damages that we see every year. So that's why this particular plan is not going to sit on the shelf and collect dust. What we put into this plan is important because when we go for mitigation funds, that's why mitigation.
It's actually, I misspoke. Not just, no, I didn't mean to interrupt, but it's not just post-disaster mitigation funds. It has a mitigation grant funds.
Right.
Pre and post.
So after a presidential declaration, there's generally funds are brought to the community to do mitigation projects for drainage, for other items that would help mitigate the damage before the storm occurs. So there's less of the aftermath and life loss and the economic slowdown of a community, so that we're up and running right away, or there is no disaster at all. So when we can identify those areas where they're key for repairs or redos or all of those items that will help us be more sustainable, that is what this plan is really about, is trying to get the monies up, find those monies up front that will help us be more resilient, and then also to have the opportunity to get funding for things that we can't even anticipate happening. A lot of times I hear, they're just helping those people who are needed. I'm like, no, there's a fire in California, FEMA shows up. When there's a tornado, no matter where you are, FEMA will come and help you, and that's why this particular plan of all is important. And I don't want anybody to think that this is just something that's going to sit around, because I'm going to use it to the best of its ability.
Thank you very much.
So it's important what we put in.
It's a great plan, and just outside of the funding portion, it's an action plan that will ultimately make the community safer. So ideally, if the plan's working, if it's fully implemented, which, believe me, fully implemented is sort of a pie in the sky outreach, but if the plan is fully implemented, your resiliency is greatly increased and your damages from predictable storms will be decreased. There's always going to be the outlier that we don't predict for.
So even though we cover losses, can you obtain grant money for certain things, for what?
So drainage, okay, so say there's an undersized culvert. We can go for funding to increase the size of the culvert. It won't come out of the top of coffers. We can go for that mitigation grant to improve the flowage so that certain areas won't get flooded. So we need to identify those, we need to add them into the action plan, and then, identify who the key parties will be in that development of that particular item. So, and he'll explain that action plan to you better.
It also, if you combine post-disaster mitigation grant funds with the recovery fund, the project work funds that you get for the public. You can combine the two, so the public assistance funds that you get after a storm that aren't really tied to grants, it's just you have so much damage and you're going to get it. Those require you to build to certain specifications. Generally, they use the existing codes. So you can't build a building back to, before we have fire codes. But, and I learned this really I got a better idea when I was down here with FEMA a couple weeks ago, when we were talking about the seawalls and the reconstruction of the seawalls and how they can be built back as they are, because there is no real national standard code for a seawall, so the default is to build back where they are. But to improve them, you can combine mitigation funding, and then you can build up to a better standard.
So we want to
raise the standards.
Build it back better. So basically, when we can redesign something to improve its quality of protection, we can do so. And using a new executive order that was just put in place in January by Obama, we can also add in sea level rise to that. So by making seawalls higher, that's a part of the whole ability to do a better job of building our infrastructure in a way that's going to help protect us and fortify us in the long run.
Up until the sea level rise was sort of run into this, you could build a wall and engineer it so that it could be added onto, but you weren't going to get the funding to add onto.
So would it come out of the town's, any funds that the town could either, add to as another grant, or it would come out of the town's funds, so to pay for it?
This would be federal funding.
So basically what we do,
with the civil rights.
right, we go to those funding sources that would make it available to us to repair, and then
we would go to the mitigation funds to build it back better. So we add 2 feet to the top of the wall.
There is a 25% local match to the funding, federal funding you get. Depending on the event, then sometimes gets adjusted to a 20% or a 15%, but typically.
But-
Right, no, it's,
75
Does
is
this
15.
apply to any body of water, such as rivers, or
oh,
is it
yes,
just the
no,
ocean?
no, it's, any
So
natural
if you
hazard.
could say that the damage was due to storm.
Storm, river over tops and banks, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
If you have a specific scenario, when we get to the writing part, please. Sure.
I think there's some confusion sometimes between the National Flood Insurance Program and FEMA's operation. And do the people who don't have flood insurance get FEMA funds? And where's the crossover?
Well, there's two different post-disaster funds. There's public assistance funds, which are for the public, not the public, the individual, but for the public structures, infrastructure,
Municipalities?
municipality. Yes.
Okay.
And then there's individual assistance, which is more on the line of loans and grants to specific individuals. Now, as far as, the way the law has always been interpreted was if you don't have flood insurance, then your home is not covered with flood, and that you're not supposed to get assistance for flood-related damage. Because that, the people that are paying for flood insurance all the time are paying for it, and then when they apply for a low-cost loan. That kind of got swayed a little bit post-Katrina. There was a lot of non-insured homes, non-insured structures. But then when we came back to Sandy, they started enforcing it again. And that was, between Katrina and Sandy was when the Bigger Waters Act, which I'm going to say familiar with it, which has gone through several name changes, came out and was going to start raising the rates very dramatically, but without any adjustments to how the plan was being implemented. So now they've taken that step back, and I don't know that the new rollout is 100%. It's a lot better than what was going to happen, but it's still got some tweaks to it here and there. And what they did give themselves in the new bill was flexibility to make some of those changes. Bigger Waters was, you're either this or this. There was no black and white, there was no adaptation to it. So the new rollout's a little bit more user-friendly, for lack of a better term. So there's certain things the president has the discretion to do after a disaster. And in Katrina, they paid out money to people who weren't insured.
Now, that came out of FEMA funds and not the flood insurance? Or did
That
the
came
flood-
out of FEMA, it's not out of the flood insurance. Flood insurance will only, and the flood insurance is sort of controlled by FEMA, but the money is obviously through your rates. But, yes, no, the flood insurance actually is in a deficit, so they have to flood money out through FEMA to get to the flood insurance. But no, those people weren't getting, they were getting individual assistance through FEMA disaster declaration, not through the National Flood Insurance Program.
But many people don't believe they need flood insurance if they don't have to have it, because they think their homeowners will pay for any damage they get.
That's a
And
huge
you
part of the
can't make them
education.
understand that their homeowners won't pay for it.
And it's hard to get an insurance person to look you straight in the eye and tell you, my guy said, no. I mean, that's, but a lot of them won't come right out and say, no, you're not covered. Well, it doesn't matter. And that was one of the problems, not to get to deviate too much. Chelsea also, she has a standing order. When I start telling stories or talking too much, to throw something at me. One of the challenges down in Katrina, the insurance companies balked at paying for the damages, and the argument was the damage, and not New Orleans. New Orleans is underwater. It's underwater before the storm, so after isn't. But other portions of the area, Mississippi and Alabama, was the damage to the house because of flooding from the sea, or was it from wind and rain? And the insurance companies were saying it was flooding from the sea instead of wind and rain. Wind and rain is covered by homeowner insurance, flooding from the sea is not.
That's happened here too. It's just like we had 1991. Big arguments between homeowners and national flood. Each was blaming the other. And you can get into that.
To their credit, and this was in a sales pitch for any insurance company, one insurance company went down to New Orleans and said, okay, let's pay the claim. But they weren't going to argue, they weren't going to go through the court process to argue. They said, let's pay the claim.
And plenty of others that didn't want.
Right. Well, the big hands people didn't exactly hold up the best hand. So, anyway, back to goals, actions, and action plan. So we want to have goals. We have some goals here that are being refined for this plan. We want to make sure that they're updated and reflect the change. The community's changed in the last 5 years. Maybe not a lot, but enough. But you also want to make sure your goals aren't so sensitive that they have to be changed every 5 years. So there should be some durability to the goals. The actions, on the other hand, are things that will adjust over the 5 years. We're probably going to have some that continue on from plan to plan, but there should be new ones that come up in each plan. And then, you've had disasters since the last plan. So we've got some more lessons learned about what disasters can do. The unfortunate situation that Situate's in is because you haven't gotten the funding from NEMO, you weren't able to do all the repairs from NEMO before you got hit with Juno. So the damages from Juno were exacerbated because the damage from NEMO still existed. And that's a cycle that, if you have storms every year, hey, it's going. If you have storms every year, you're constantly playing catch up like that. It becomes a real challenge. It's my little goal picture. I originally found that during World Cup soccer a couple of years ago. And the first question I got was, who is that? I don't know. So we want these are the mitigation goals that the community has set up. And protecting public health and safety, reducing property damages. These are very broad. That's okay. Minimize social disruption and distress. This is a key one because we don't want to have to take people out of their area, out of where they live for extended periods of time. It doesn't do the family any good. It doesn't do the community any good to have to manage that. And it causes additional stresses on the family. So if we can keep people in their homes by protecting them, it's a better thing. Economic losses. A lot of community people look at me, they're not in the business community, and go, yeah, economic, yeah. But think about it, when your businesses are shut down after a storm, the tax revenue the community loses during that impacts your ability to recover. So there's a time, we're actually looking at, we're doing a couple of studies right now to see if we can really do a hard analysis of revenue loss post-disaster and the impact it has on communities. Not just from business revenue, but also from personal revenue, sales taxes and things of that nature. Ongoing operations of critical facilities. Obviously, we want to make sure that you still have power, that you still can get water, that you can flush your toilet. We want to make sure that those little things are all working for you. And reduce the dependence. I love this one. Reduce dependence on natural, others for natural disaster. Although you have a lot of storms here that require presidential declarations, I'm willing to bet you've had a lot more storms that have done damage that don't get a presidential declaration. 99% of the storms that happen in the country don't get a presidential declaration, but they still do some level of damage. So this plan, although it's designed by FEMA so that you'll be eligible for funds, it also gives you the ability to align your internal community priorities and resources so that you're spending them more appropriately. And these are the mitigation action areas: health, safety, property protection, resource preservation. So each one of our actions is going to fall under one of those 4 areas. Implementation strategy, and again, this is one of the things that I really like about the hazard mitigation. It's got timelines. The timelines have to occur within the 5-year window of the plan. That doesn't mean that you're committing to completing something in the 5 year. You're not committing any money from the town. You're not obligating money out of the town budget, but you're committing to trying to get these actions done within the 5 year, or at least addressing them in the 5 year. And that's why we do have some that carry over from plan to plan. So we have a timeline, we have a budget, we identify where the possible funding can come from. Can it be done out of the municipal budget? Some things can be. Is it something that's going to require a FEMA grant? The unsuccessful plans have 15 actions that say FEMA grant, 400,000, FEMA grant, 15 million. And, it doesn't have any responsibility on the town side. And there's other grants out there too. HUD's really stepped up in the last few years. They have a ton of grants. The EPA is now coming out with coastal resiliency grants. Well, they've had it for a few years, but they're actually getting the funding more now than they have in the past. Who's going to be responsible from the community for making sure that action gets completed or addressed? Who's tracking it? And that's an individual in the community, and it's not the same individual, it's not the director of planning. It's an individual.
It's planet Earth.
It's somebody in the community that has the tag as the person that's responsible for tracking that action. And then we have to look at what resources might be needed and the feasibility. We analyze the feasibility. It's easy to put a bunch of pie in the sky actions in it, but it's got to be a feasible action. We have to review it. Is it something that can be accomplished? So I know this is relatively unreadable. These are the town mitigation actions, and we don't need to go through these because we already know some of these need to be updated based on activities that the community's taken in the last 5 years. But what I wanted you to see is the fact that the community has a wide array of actions. Obviously, flood hazard is, a main concern for the community. It talks about a lot of the repairs, the seawall repairs. We spent some time down at a couple of the beaches to go and see what some of the seawalls look like. And for the layman standing there looking at it, it looks fine until you climb on top of it and you walk down it, which we did, in dress shoes. I'm an old army guy, so falling on rocks is kind of part of it. But we got to see where the damage to the wall is. That damage that you can't see from standing down on the beach. And it was good for me. And I know the FEMA representative that was looking, and I really appreciated the opportunity to get up there. The key intersections protection, which is an interesting look. Normally we talk about evacuation routes in total, and I thought it was I had to do a little bit of mental assessment about key intersections versus evacuation routes. And they're mutually supporting, but what's more vulnerable? And when I look at it from a community perspective, in your case, the intersections, we have different routes, but we have certain intersections that if we lose that intersection, we're not getting anywhere. And it's not just evacuation, it's getting emergency response assets out to your neighborhoods and out to your community, out to where people may need them. Some more NFIP compliance. We talked about it. And the flood insurance program is a huge education piece. The people that don't believe they need it, it's just so hard. Massachusetts has done a little bit better job lately, the insurance commission, of pushing the insurance companies to be more forthcoming. And I think most of them want to be. In all honesty, I don't think it's, but there are some insurance guys, people that just won't answer that question because it's not a clean-cut answer. So you're putting them in kind of a difficult position. But there is more guidance out there that we can talk about, including the plan, and And we can have some educational platforms. It doesn't have to be come sit in the auditorium for an education. It could be some online information that gets put on the town website. There's certain communities that have gone and developed question and answer interactive databases so that you can want to put your information on it, and it gives you more information back about whether or not you need national, you obviously, if you don't have a mortgage, you're not required to have it, but that doesn't mean you don't need it. That just means you're not required by the government. In the flood mapping, I know the flood mapping is an issue. We'll see where the flood maps come out. You're not alone. All of Rhode Island is in the same boat. Looking at most of the Mass Coast is, except for the parts that for some reason didn't get remapped. So we'll have to see where that falls. And when the new flood maps get adopted, if they get adopted, then we have to take a look at that. And we want to build this plan, because that's probably going to happen after this plan is implemented. So we want to build some flexibility into this plan and be able to adapt. We don't want to have anything so rigid that if one thing doesn't happen the way we plan it to happen, that the rest of the plan is no good. More? And you'll notice that the town was prioritized from high priority, medium priority, low priority. Having conservation in charge of the brush. Yes, sir.
Are the timeframes when these things are supposed to be finished by?
Yes, yeah. This, actually, well, this plan has it written as a time period, 2009 to 2013. Typically, what I like to do is near-term, mid-term, or long-term.
Okay.
And instead of trying to nail down years like that, so that if it's something that's going to be implemented within the next 6 months, it might be a tree trimming sustainment program to keep trees off the electrical lines and the communication lines. That's something we can list as a near term. I would love to be able to list the barrier, the seawall restoration in the near to midterm. Because really, how many years? It's been 2 years since the first storm that we had received. That's what we want to be able to get that action moving quicker. And these questions are being raised up to FEMA about, the fact that the repetitive storm cycle that you find yourself in is creating more damages because the process is so bad. Now, unfortunately, just today there was an article that came out about the fraud and waste that went on in Mississippi after Hurricane Katrina on a large number of grants. It was a small fraction of the overall number of grants, but it was large enough that it shouldn't have happened for fraudulent reasons.
So this was made in 2010?
Yes.
Okay.
And it was adopted in 2011. So
okay.
The adoption process, the approval and adoption process can be lengthy. Now, the FEMA guidance says FEMA will get them to do before the drop days. I gotta give them credit. This is a small staff at the FEMA region that's reviewing these plans. They're pretty good about getting them turned around and getting them back up. I'm going to meet with the state next week to talk about their approval process. So we have to submit this plan to MEMA and DCR for their review and approval. And they'll probably come back with some comments and some recommendations for things that we need to adjust. My history is that it's usually word changes, language changes, not anything substantive. And then we get it back, the town agrees with the recommendations and the changes from the state, we make whatever's necessary, and we forward it out to them again. They forward it to the FEMA region, reviews it. They may have more comments, they forward them back. Again, it's usually something we can turn around in a week and get it back up there. And then get it kind of approved by FEMA, and then it comes back to the town, and it has to be presented to the town council for formal adoption. So it's a fairly intricate process. Now, the piece that I like to throw into it is, before we even send it to MEMA the first time for review, we present it to the town council. Because I always thought it was insulting to say that we're going to come back to the town council after it's been reviewed by the state and the federal government and ask you to adopt a plan that you've never seen or nobody's ever presented before. So I like to make sure that the town council is tied into this early on.
I think you mean worse than
I'm stuck on it, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah. Well, no, you know, it's funny, again, tomorrow, we have selectmen, and I still call them councilmen. They don't like. So yes, what is
You might
it?
recognize it.
Huh?
You might not recognize it.
I gotta stop that. I've come up with my generic terms that I apply. So, I don't know, did I answer your question? And I know it was
Yeah,
long
I
as it's
have one more. So are these things supposed to be completed by 2015?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
They can, if they're not completed, they could be carried on. They're goals. I mean, the actions are to be implemented, but they're goal actions. In other words, if the funding becomes available, if the opportunity exists, and we want to take advantage of that.
Okay.
This just helps you identify them as a priority.
Yeah.
So part of the review of our plan will also be, we have to take a look at the actions that we have set forth. We have to give a response back as to how successful we were, what did get accomplished, and what was ongoing and will continue to go forth, and then those items that didn't get accomplished, and why. Because it's generally a reason why. Was it not funded? Was there no funding available? The town just didn't have the bandwidth to hold on to that action item. And it may mean that, some action items really don't really stay in the plan.
It
just
may be
depends.
determined that there's an action item that's in it that isn't necessary anymore, because other events have occurred that will adjust that action. And that's again, we don't want to get so rigid that we say it in the 5-year plan that we have to do. This is a live plan. As Nancy said, this isn't just written, done, and approved. This plan should be changed. There should be periodic meetings of the Hazard Mitigation Committee. Should be reviews after every major natural hazard, natural weather event, so that you can take a look at the plan and see and then analyze whether or not you have the right actions on it. There's nothing that says you can't look at an action that you put on the plan for approval in 2016 and say in 2017, we were wrong about that one. Cross that one out, we have a new action that needs to go.
And the priorities may change too, so what we deemed maybe as a mid-level priority may become a high priority. And I'm not saying that with any thoughts in mind, but I'm saying that's generally how we're going to look at it as well, and you as well should look at it. And stay tuned, because we're going to work on the plan, and then we're going to come back in December-ish, November, December-ish, sometime like that, when the plan has become draft. And so that we'll ask you then to take a look at what we've written and what our actions have come to fruition for the plan. And then, you can comment again at that point before we even, send it up to MEMA. The town will get a look at what we've written and decided will be our goals and actions in the future.
Not only, as Nancy mentioned, not only will we have it on the town meeting, it'll be publicly available in draft form. I don't know how we put it, post it
On my website, yeah.
We usually throw
And
a copy away.
if you're having trouble getting to it, don't hesitate to email me, because I can send you a link to it as well. It's hard to send some of the larger documents because they're too big to send. So if I post it on the website and you can't find it, just contact me. I'll be happy to send it to you.
And so the input, and that's why we get our comments and input, that's my angry input guy. We really want, and we're going to capture the discussion we had there as part of this as well. But, any particular comments that you mentioned, riverine flooding scenario, I think you have something that's specific, not just naming the river. So we want to make sure we capture them and take them back and put them in the plan.
Earlier you said something about salt marshes
Yes.
and allowing them to go sort of back to nature, doing their thing. When you have cobble or rock substance cover a portion of salt marsh, does that mean you just let it go? I mean, that's, nature has put it there, and nature will take it away or leave it.
This is kind of, I mean, that kind of action, it's outside of my area, like I.
You would run it up, so I.
Right, the specific stuff, but I know salt marshes are good, something that gets down that line, that's where I turn to Chelsea.
Oh, okay.
This is a big issue down in Hummerock.
It is.
Down at the north end of Hummerock, we have overwash, it goes across the road and into the salt marsh, or very close to it. And the state, apparently, up until now at least, has said if it gets on the salt marsh, we're not touching it. It's not, they gotta start thinking outside the box. Because what's happening is that you're starting to lose part of your salt marsh. The same thing's happening over at Peggy Beach
And
And is it the cobble coming in from?
and over at Minot.
comes over the seawall,
The cobble and.
yep, that was a salt marsh. And then we lose it. We've lost huge patches of salt marsh where I, and where she is, even more.
Okay, that's.
And in Humrock, okay, because there's so many houses and they put up our pilings now, it washes under the
Under the
houses,
house.
across the road because it's all flat, into the marsh, and then into the South River.
There are, I am a fan, and, you know, I stand the risk of saying this. I'm a fan of elevation, but I'm a fan of elevation as a whole package. And that's
Some
right.
protection
You can't,
in
right,
front of
you
the
can't,
houses.
you can't just elevate and pray. You have
Exactly.
to- It's gotta be a full package.
The normal growth plan, if you will, of a barrier beach is that it continually moves inland. So ultimately, elevation means that you're going to end up with another island over your own.
Yeah, listen, I wasn't really thinking about Humrock when I said that, but yes, you know, I'm talking more about the land-based. But no, you're right, I misspoke thinking about Humrock. Which is fine.
So you've been,
I've been, actually, as a North Shore kid, the first thing you do when you get your license is drive to the South Shore to go to the beach.
Hummerock.
Humrock.
Good beach.
I guess my general comment about everything shows, my concern is that there's an awful lot of emphasis on coastal storms, coastal flooding, coastal mitigation, but there's never really much to talk about what's going to happen in a major hurricane here. I just was playing around some numbers. There have been 8 hurricanes since 1635 that struck south of the Wayland Section. Started in 1635, which may have been the worst of them all, by the way. The most recent one, Hurricane Bob, 2 in 1954, Carol and Edmund. They all took kind of a track just to the west of here, so that meant that the winds were parallel to the coast. There really wasn't any coastal flooding in any of those storms. But the damage inland was horrendous. And if I was a planner, I would be very concerned that enough attention is paid to what's going to happen here. What's going to happen here is that there's going to be a vast number of trees coming down. Entire neighborhoods are going to be isolated. Power's going to be out for an extended period of time. We saw all of that in Tropical Storm Irene, and that was just a tiny taste when winds never got over 60 miles an hour with us. You get a Hurricane Carol that struck in 1954. It's going to be massive tree damage. And I think the town needs to be thinking about that in those terms. And when you figure, on average, these storms since the 1635 storm was struck every just under 50 years. So it's not something that happens so infrequently you don't have to think about it.
But it doesn't take that long.
Well, of course not.
Central Mass, we were frozen in time for 10 days with an unexpected ice storm.
Well, ice storms can do it too.
So, yes, and I appreciate that. We do, I can actually, we have the ability to actually model an estimate of tree damage on public ways so that we can figure.
I just think it should be calculated in the low ways.
is. Thank you.
One of the things that the state just recently unveiled was their know your zones for evacuations. So if you're talking about a Category 4 hurricane or a Category 3 hurricane, the state will implement potentially an evacuation of the coast and areas that they think will be impacted by the storm. So part of my role as a CRS coordinator, and I have members of the CRS committee here, is to talk about know your zone. And I know we have a lot of zones, like we have the flood zone, but now we have an evacuation zone. So they have identified areas where it's a Category 1, 2, and that part of the zone is a certain number of houses and areas where you have to pay attention. And then there's a Category 3 and then a Category 4. So there's a few categories to look at, and I think I have it posted on my website. But again, if you're interested in knowing what your zone is, I'll be happy to identify where your house is located in an evacuation zone. Should the state declare an evacuation? They are the only ones who can.
I think and one of the challenges, and I just want to tie these last two conversations sort of together, our hurricane plans are very focused on a storm coming in from the coast. And Michelle will bring up a good point. Many of our tropical storms and hurricanes hit the coast down in Rhode Island and travel up Maine up through the land. So we want to look at, because we are very prepared to evacuate the coast, but the coast may be the safe place to go.
That's what happened in 38, 44, 54 twice.
We want to take a look at it. Quite honestly, Route 3 is the evacuation route.
It's not going to work.
Not get up to that on a business day.
Both of us left our office. Did you leave at what, 3? I left my office in Watertown at 10 past 2, had to stop at a store right here, just because I knew that I was going to be in the Route 3 traffic all the way down. So, yes, I mean, to say Route 3 is the evacuation route, okay.
Sounds good. It's not.
All of us know what the Route 3 evacuation zone would look like during an evacuation, much the way it does during rush hour traffic at 6 o'clock in the morning. Shouldn't there be some kind of plan for a short distance evacuation place that is high in the ground?
Absolutely. The thought line on evacuations, and this deviates a little bit from the mitigation plan, but just the thought process on evacuations now is shortest distance possible to safety. So if we don't have to put you on an evacuation route, and even better, if we don't have to have you evacuate in your car, if we can do some sort of a transportation plan. We wrote the pedestrian evacuation plan for the District of Columbia. Why? Because everybody parks in a garage, and it takes one car to stop that evacuation from happening. So the evacuation plan for DC is based on people walking out and being picked up on buses in the quad areas on the outside of the city. We did the carless evacuation down in New Orleans after to talk about what was done there. So yes, it's shortest distance to a safe location is the best solution. Because we went to this, a few years ago, we went to this mass shelter concept where we were going to have one shelter in a region that would handle the 15 towns from that region. It's not realistic. It's not good. It's not quality. So the idea is that closer shelters. I haven't looked at your shelter plan, so I honestly, it's not part of
It's
it.
called a comprehensive emergency management plan.
Yeah.
And the chief of the fire department, John Murphy, Al Elliott, and myself worked with MEMA to update our plan so that we are tuned in to not only the town, but to the region and to the state management plan in case of an emergency. And that, all of these items would fall into that realm. So it talks about shelters and critical facilities, and we'll provide that to you as well. It was just updated, all of the names of the contacts have been changed. So if there's any hazards that they have to be aware of, where we're going to go, who gets called when, all of that is in that
I have seen that, but I just haven't really analyzed the
Okay,
shelters
so that's-
themselves, because, you know,
Right.
for the purposes of the mitigation plan, I need to know that they exist and where they might be generally, but I'm focused more on what you tell me about critical routes and intersections. I know it might sound a little sort of callous and not, but we want to stay, go ahead.
Well, it occurred to me after the last statement about short distance to station, it seems to me it makes a lot of sense where we position or build our municipal buildings. The other night, we were advised, I think they mentioned that someplace near the police station or the high school could very well be in the flood zone. And that's the main evacuation site. So, I mean, the consideration for where the municipal buildings are positioned seems to me should be part of it.
If they're going to be used as part of the shelter.
Question, how does adequate maintenance get built into this? Particularly the damage is either caused by or exacerbated by the failure over a number of years not to maintain something well.
FEMA hates the word maintenance. But the truth is, culverts. Culverts may be undersized, they're even more undersized when they're clogged with trees. So if we're not maintaining the culvert openings, then we're making ourselves more susceptible. The seawall, and this goes back to the repair and maintenance of the seawall. You know, if you're 4 storms behind on being able to recover, then that damage is just going to get worse and worse as the storms go by. Inland, riverine flooding, once it happens, it's more likely to happen again because the system is following its own weakness.
Is that explicitly treated in the plan?
It will address those items in the plan as part of the action. That's where we want to identify those action items that will make us more resilient. And so it's maintenance. I'll give you the example of the power and communication lines. Most communities write tree trimming maintenance in their plans. That's not a mitigation action. Sustaining the communications and the electrical lines is a mitigation action. Now, the way you do that includes trimming the trees, but there's other avenues to that as well. So we want to make sure, the reason we're trimming the trees isn't to keep the trees healthy. Big fan of keeping trees healthy. But it's to keep the power lines and the communication lines functional. So our mitigation action will deal with the lines and how you implement that, maybe tree trimming.
We've identified many areas of the seawalls and abutments that need repair. And every time we bring it up, we're told there's no funds. How do we get around that?
Well, given what FEMA, I know FEMA has most of your seawall maintenance already in for reimbursement from previous storms.
No. None of the seawalls are. The revetment, some of the revetment and the stone work.
What happened with the town? FEMA came to town.
We do.
We understand, and they made the comment that the walls had not been maintained, they were poor condition, falling apart, and therefore the town could not show, for the most part, that the walls had been damaged in that particular storm, so therefore they were not eligible.
I hadn't heard that, but go ahead.
I don't have the paperwork in front of me, but I'm sure that we have parts of mitigation. And keep in mind, they only do a small section that was damaged. They don't do the whole wall. They'll come in and pay for just that small section. So on Oceanside, we just 2 weeks ago were out there with FEMA looking at Oceanside. And we're in the process of rebuilding a section of Oceanside. Should begin, I don't know, within the next few weeks, if not next week. That's being paid for under a grant, but keep in mind, with all of the FEMA funds, is reimbursement. So when we fix the section of Oceanside, where we have that one section that's going to be part of the FEMA grant, we'll get the funding back for that particular section. So the cost of that will come back to the town. And then we'll take that, I'm sure that the plan is to take that money and then put it back into another section. so that we can then get reimbursed back for that as well. So there are sections, the revetments are a big area that have seen a lot of damage. That is on the list for repairs, and there are some seawall sections, but it's not complete sections, because that's not how the program works. They only repair the specific damage that's done. And the difficulty is teasing out what was done in Sandy, what was done in Nemo, and what was done in Juneau. And they won't
Tom's done
talk.
a great job mapping.
We did, and they've congratulated the engineering department for the work that they've done, putting together the maps and the photographs together in a plan. It's very professional and very well done, and very easy to explain and show the damage and where it was and how that was done.
Can you just make a note for me this way, FEMA, PW?
What?
Because I want to go back and, I'd like to go back and look at the.
When you talk to DPW, he'll tell you, and he's told us so many times in this building the way it is. FEMA will come in after a storm, okay? This section here damaged in this storm, this section was
Right.
damaged, that section was damaged in that storm. In between, no, that just wasn't, we can't show, or you can't prove that it was damaged in that storm because it's all deteriorated and over here. So they'll pay for here and here and here, but it's not cost effective. You've got to replace them.
Because the challenge that you get here is that you have a weak link in the middle, you're going to do new stuff.
And
So here's what we have, a pre-disaster mitigation fund. So and unfortunately, you're in a position where you're not sure about what you're getting from post-disaster mitigation funds, or what you're getting from your public assistance. So in order to go for a FEMA pre-disaster mitigation grant, you have to know what areas are already being covered by other funding sources, so because you can't ask for funding in the same place twice. That's something again, it's not a mitigation plan thing, but let's talk about that, because I think we can align some stuff so that, and that's why I want to look at your PWs and see what it is that you have in the pipeline, and then look at the HMP. Part of the HMP, and see what we can line up for maybe next year's mitigation side.
I'm intrigued with mitigation actions, item P, structural projects, property protection. It seems that we're dealing with things that have already broken or been damaged. So is there, as part of a mitigation, proactive?
Yes.
And to that degree, and I don't know whether this is in your realm or not, has there been any consideration for wave attenuating devices that are planted in the ocean that kill the waves before they hit the seawall?
That's a good, it's something we can put up there as an action to review. Wave attenuation devices.
The short word is WADS, W-A-D-S. Wave attenuating devices. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that. There's a good reason for that.
We know you were about to, Frank.
Only a matter of time.
I'm not familiar with them, I don't know,
You can bring your projector.
I did.
is it, we gonna have one movies?
If you want to stick around after everybody's gone, I'll show you some amazing video.
Can I take my tie off?
You can get it.
Just the tie. Okay, no, that's the kind of, we want to look at actions. I mean, it's easy because building walls, there's a finite amount of protection you're going to get by building walls. So we want to look at those actions that take that protection that much further. And still allow you to be in a functioning community. That's the other part. It's easy, we can put a bubble over the time. NBC did that for a TV show.
But getting into our walls, many of them are almost 100 years old. The construction of them back 100 years ago was to take beach rock and beach sand and a little cement put together. Those walls are pulverizing now.
We did, yes, so we had this conversation with FEMA, and it was actually an education point for the FEMA. He had not heard of that before.
Oh my God.
We need a section.
Well, you live with it.
Well, this gentleman, I don't believe, has ever been here before.
A section of seawall that somebody brought to one of our meetings to show the decay in the core.
No,
It looked all right on the outside, but the core had all deteriorated.
when it was presented at my first meeting down here, somebody told me about that. And I'd be honest with you, I've never heard that elsewhere. So I can't say it's unique. Maybe everybody else just doesn't know that it's happening to them. But the gentleman that was here, I don't know, he was a fairly higher level specialist that was down here to review some damages.
So FEMA hired and sent 2 specialists to the town to take a look at the development and see all the damages that occurred during FEMA. So, but when we were out there, we showed them everything.
Right. He was, I gotta give.
He had an education.
He was very open-minded and open to education, which was very good.
That's refreshing.
It really is. I don't work with him, I work with him all the time. I understand that they're short-staffed, that they have a lot of pressure. Many times, there's a storm somewhere else, they get shipped elsewhere, but they also have a role to do for their region, for their constituents in the region. Our job is to help them do their job. As a consultant, my job is to give them good products to review so that they don't have to spend a ton of time.
People that come before just want to look at the exterior of the walls. They do not do any drilling in to see what the middle looks like.
I'm taking that lesson with me everywhere I go from now on.
You want to take a piece of it.
You might want to
Like show and tell.
You might want to talk to DPW. They've done some floorboards in a couple of these walls.
We have talked about it, I want to get some more information on this, and while I might not throw a piece of the seawall in my Civic,
You can take a little piece.
I may take some pictures of it. If I have to, I'll bring my truck down. But I would like to get some more pictures of it, get some more, because I think it's an interesting that everybody should consider. I mean, we have done borings before, we have looked at what the undersides of the seawall look like before, but I don't know that anybody's ever said to me before that the core of the seawall was, the new seawall was built on top of the old seawall. And the fact that it was made out of beach rock and beach sand.
You could see the
It started deteriorating the day it was built.
Exactly.
It's horrifying to think, but maybe they even use seawater to mix with concrete.
Yeah. I can't,
I remember doing some research when I first joined the Seawall Committee, and I'm going back even to about 1879. They needed a seawall. They simply put out a call to the town's men, okay? Bring your shovels, bring your hose, if you got a team with a wagon, we'll pay you double and so forth. And in fact, my grandfather was paid $1.65 for a day's work. And that's what they did. They built a seawall on the spot.
that was, 100 years ago, that was the DPW. They were the same guys showing up with buckets from the fire brigade.
Yeah.
In clubs for the police department. But no, part of that too, I think, was a skill set thing, not to get this historically philosophical. I think 100 years ago, everybody had that basic skill set that they could do things like that. It's hard if you want to get a group of volunteers to put up a kid's park. You can't find 6 guys that know how to mix a bag of ready-mix concrete. That's actually was reliving a personal experience.
But it also seems, and I've been in a number of these kinds of forums over the last 6 or 8 months, that the general thrust for shoreline protection, and perhaps part of that is as a mitigation as well, is sacrificial dunes or beach replenishment, revetments or retreat. And there's one fellow who's been quoted as saying, that's all it is. There's no other possibility.
Well, I don't know that there's ever no other possibility. I know that each individual piece of that is part of a system. And no one of those is the right fit for every situation. Now, if there's some way to reduce the wave action before it even comes to the shore, whether it's through your device or through distant barrier, then that's even better. But they're using combinations of actions to reduce the vulnerability. And then, you know, it's very hard in these old established communities to say, you know, you're right on the water. So you're at that interface. So we have to look at the best ways to do that. So you're not going to give up on homes on the water. Eventually, nature might take them, but you want to stay where you are. So we want to make sure that we develop the actions that give you the best chance. Is there a 100% guarantee? You know, when I got in, I'll talk to God, and there's a little conversation about mitigation. But until then, we're kind of at the mercy to say we can do the best we can with predictable nature.
Do the elevation grants come as part of the mitigation program?
Yes.
That seems to be very effective.
They are, but, you know, just back to the elevation really should be part of the package. Because when you do elevate when you elevate the structure, you're creating additional exposure underneath. But also, one thing we discovered during taking a look at some historical elevations that they were proposing in another state was they were going to elevate the structures and they were going to elevate them above the tree line. And they would be exposing the roof line of these structures to a new hazard that they had never been exposed to before. So yeah, they'd be out of the water, but they would be getting their roofs blown off by the wind that they'd never been exposed to. Yeah. And somebody said, hey, well, those roofs have survived all these hurricanes in the past. Well, no, they haven't. They've never been touched by hurricanes since the trees have been there.
Two of the points you brought up, one of them was very, living in Duxbury 30 years ago and there being a wonder whether the nuclear power plant was going to explode, we as parents were sent documents from the state that we were all to pick our children up at Hanover Mall and not go on Route 3, stay on Route 53. All those children, and we're supposed to go to Hanover Mall. It was literally ridiculous.
Foolish.
No one paid any attention to it. We just prayed, you know. Anyway, the other was, you brought up a good point about specific intersections in this town. It wasn't until Dave Ball pointed out, my husband and I went through the blizzard in Minot, and when he stopped and he pointed out the different areas, for us to get out of the beach, to even get to North Situate, there was no way. Hatherley Road would have been flooded, Gannett Road, where Border Street comes from Cohasset, that was flooded. I mean, we saw marks on trees that were up near the branches. We would have had no way out, and it wouldn't have been just our little beach area. All of North Situate couldn't get out.
I'm going to give you my emergency management textbook professional answer.
Get a boat.
No, evacuate before the storm.
Well, yes.
That's exactly.
And that's what came out of it for us.
We have a neighborhood association, and the theme is make a decision 4 hours before high tide and either leave or stay. But nothing in between.
I did a presentation for the governor of Rhode Island about freedom on hurricane evacuation. And I had a picture of a gentleman down in the middle of his backswing, and it was all forced down in Newport. Bright sunny, I said, Governor, that's what's going on. You have to make a decision on whether or not to evacuate. It's not the dark, cloudy, gloomy, million-mile-an-hour winds. It's 36 hours before those winds get here that we start saying we need to evacuate.
Orleans, the perfect example.
Waited and waited and waited, and never executed their plan. And, you know, there's so many, I could pontificate for hours on reading it and on just in New Orleans, lack of leadership and lack.
Sandy was the same way.
You know, and New York had issues with Sandy from a different perspective. They didn't want to tell anybody where the evacuation shelters were. You know, they'll find them, but if we tell them where they are, they'll all go there. So, so we want to make sure, and actually, I know I was in another state that had 2 sets of evacuation shelters. One in case it was a coastal storm and one if it wasn't.
So I mean, that's,
So now you have to decide which shelter you're going to?
in 78, we didn't know
Right.
it was going to be that bad.
Right. 78 kind of hit us all by
Yeah,
accident.
yeah.
I was a much younger person, and I got experience driving a snowplow in the blizzard, so it was my first experience making a boatload of money. But none of us realized that was going to.
Right. So that's where common sense comes into play. And you
Right.
have to make a decision that based on where you are and what.
And, you know, I understand that people want to stay with their house. I really do get that
Yeah.
from a personal perspective. But, you know, there was the whole story that, I don't know the total truthfulness of it, but it came out of Hurricane Rita. The emergency services people in Houston, Southern Texas, were told, you're not going to go after hurricane, storm force winds come in. Nobody is authorized to go do any rescue. You don't want any heroes, you don't go out there, I don't care what happens. People who refuse to evacuate, you don't go in again. You know, there's a guy supposedly from the sheriff's department went in with a shark, and he would ask people if they were going to evacuate, and they said no. He said, yeah, you write your social security number on one arm and one leg, so when you find the body parts, we can identify.
Just went down here.
And people changed their mind. Because they were told, we're not going back in. And I'm a big believer of not putting police and firefighter and DPW people on the road.
In 78, we didn't have the warning. We didn't have the communication systems, we didn't have the cell phones, but there was no town preparedness for it. We were coming home from work, and there was nobody to stop you from going into the zones that would be flooded. I mean, we just didn't know how bad the storm was going to be.
And even if they knew how they were going to communicate that way. Now we have roadway signs that we can light up, we have, you know, text messages that we can automatically send out, whether you sign up for it or not.
We're using code red here and
That's
such.
what we're getting on
That's
So, but even from a statewide perspective, I mean, so if you're not here in town to get the local message, we can access it from a statewide perspective, help people where it is not.
But with the cell phones, we were down in Florida and got a code red from here in Situate.
And you know, the other part about that is, there's still some unpredictability. We may have just had a tornado a couple of days ago. It wasn't a big one. It wasn't going like that in Springfield. So, and they're not, we try to predict them. We say, oh, it's hailing, okay. You know, the conditions are right for a tornado, but we don't know where or when. So there's still certain storms that we can't predict where or when. You know, hurricanes, tropical storms, snowstorms, blizzards, we got surprised a couple of times last year. There were a few of those, you know, a few of those light, fluffy storms, you know, that came at us that we didn't know. So there is still a level of unpredictability, but you mentioned the comments that, you know, what do you do? How prepared are you? And again, this is sort of outside the mitigation sector. We don't want to, mitigation, we're going to reduce the vulnerability, but just in case we don't reduce it 100%, we also want to be prepared for the react. So the mitigation plan reduces the vulnerability from an identified hazard. Hazards still happen, so you have to have the community emergency response plan or comprehensive emergency response plan. And then the next part of that is the recovery plan, and that's back where there's a little slice of mitigation plan in there, and then there's also, there's now an actual whole nother section that talks about a recovery plan. And if our mitigation plan is somewhat successful, and we've built some resiliency into your systems, we're not just recovering quicker, we're not losing it. So we don't lose the electricity, or if we lose it, now we have redundancy where it can be not that long ago, if you lost a power line, the electricity flowed one way. Now they're able to flow it, you know, different ways. So if you lose it here, unless you live where I do right next to it.
One of the things in one of the storms this year was a decision was made to turn off the power before the storm came. As a person who was among the 200 that had their homes on that list, I had less than $1,000 worth of damage on my flood coming over my wall and wrapping on my deck. But I had over $5,000 worth of damage to my home because they shut off the power. I'm an elevated structure, everything is wrapped in heat tape to keep it all running. And what happened, which I don't know if the town knew this, that because they shut off the power to the 200 homes, they would also be the last homes to go back on the grid. And where when the power got flipped back on for people, they might have lost it for 3 or 4 hours. Mine was out for 48 hours. And what that did was it allowed, in an intense, they shut it off before the storm hit, 10 o'clock at night, the dead of cold, the highest winds, and the storm didn't come in until the next morning around 5 or 6. So I'm sitting there freezing up all night long, and then they don't turn it back on. We didn't get back on the next day when it went back on for people who weren't among the lucky 200. They got their power back on a lot quicker. And that really, you know, like, I mean, I know people lost their power for 2 or 3 hours in which nothing happened. We had frozen pipes for our septic into the ground. They had to be dug up. We had to dig up the sewer. We had to dig up the water. We had to dig it up, thaw it with a heater 4 feet down in the ground to finally get the water coming back into our house. And guess what? We weren't the only one. And that's the part that nobody knew, that the first people, because they made the decision to shut it off, they had to be inspected by the plumbing inspectors and the electrical inspectors before they could turn the power back on for us.
And yes, the decision is, to be honest with you, sitting in my little house up in the middle of the state, I heard that the concept of shutting off the power, I thought was a very smart move, quite honestly, looking at some of the past. But the recovery piece, and I'm not sure how that was, I do know the story you're telling. I know the history, a little bit of what you're talking about, because we have had those discussions. One of the things that we're looking at, I know the town has already talked with, is this teaming concept where they can get multiple inspectors in here to get those houses inspected much quicker to get them back online, so they can just go down the street with the grid. One of the things we did...
I'd rather take my chances with Mother Nature than the town. I mean that, sincerely. I mean, we have a plug on the outside of our house. If the wire goes down in the street, our power is shut off outside our house, not in our house. That's
I honestly, I mean, I can't, I understand your position. I think the idea of the whole isolation of power is it's a reasonable tactic. It does provide some benefit, but by not turning it back on in a reasonable time, we're creating another problem. So,
well, we also shut it off hours ahead, in the depth of the night, in the darkness, with the high winds.
That's something we need to...
There was another facet to that, too. I know this concept of shutting it off was discussed 6 or 8 months previous to that storm, and the residents in the area who would be affected by that were not made privy to that information. People, if they had been made aware of it, they could have contacted their plumbers or electricians and had put dump valves so that they could drain their water pipes and take the water out of their toilets that are going to freeze and crack. Because that's exactly what happened. Houses, when you shut the power off, you lost your heat. Even if you had gas heat, you have an electric pilot. So you lost that. The only way you could survive would be if you had a gas log or something that didn't require a spark, or you had your own generator to provide your own power. And if the town had made those people aware of it,
I'm thinking of a couple of possible funding sources to help people set their houses up.
that would be perfect. Yeah.
We'll investigate those. It's very tricky when you start talking about individual homes, but there are some options that we can take a look at.
Back on your evacuation routes, key intersections, C Street, Berry Street, a number of other streets in Marshfield, which are the evacuation routes for Amarok,
Right.
are problems. So that's not ever mentioned in any of the plans.
C Street,
Berry Street,
Marshfield.
Bayberry, Blueberry, one of those. where Julian Street Bridge comes over?
Marshberry.
Damage and
To,
damage.
to get to Humrock, you have to go through Nashville.
I actually know that, that's one of the,
One more thing I just wanted to
Yes.
point out was that the number one cause of fires in this country, I have heard, is candles. If there's no power on in the house, what is the most common thing that everybody will dig out? Candles.
no, I don't disagree. I like the concept of isolation, just because I've seen it, it's unique to see it used up here in the Northeast. It's been used in other parts of the country, but
In a hurricane, it works, because there's no freezing
but
cold.
that's the part of it I think we need to look at, and we need to include, because there is now the team concept. I know that the town has already looked at that team concept of working with, not just the board, because Marshfield and communities right around you are in the same boat. Their inspectors are already engaged, so we want to look at inspectors from unaffected areas and bring them in to help expedite
Well,
that
an
process.
inspector is gonna help me when my house freezes up.
If we can get them up there quick enough, if we can get them quick enough up there and work with the
Well, they
team.
sure didn't get them quick enough that day.
So I'd like to disagree with your premise that this isolation concept is a good idea. You make it sound like it's very scientific, and you know exactly what's going to happen when you have a very unpredictable weather pattern. So this idea that, oh, this works real well, I think you're hearing stories of people who've said, hey, I don't think this was the smartest thing to do. I don't think they could really isolate it on a scientific basis. This house is at risk, and this house one street over isn't. I think that whole premise is just filled with presumptions that in reality have proven not to be very pragmatic.
First of all, my premise isn't based on scientific, it's based on, the unknown. If I could do a scientific analysis to say this house is going to be affected this way and going down the line, I'd take a different approach.
Well, I think that what you're hearing is some pushback to your premise that's based on, oh, we really understand how to do this. And I think what you're hearing is we don't understand how to do it, and there isn't science behind it.
And that's what, believe me, first of all, I'm not going to make your actions, the community's going to make their own actions. It's, in all seriousness, and if I gave it off as anything other than my opinion and my experience, I didn't mean that.
In support of, because I, by the way, do agree with him, and I would describe the actions the town took as arbitrary and capricious. Because of the fact there are over 2,000 homes in the floodplain, they picked 200 of them to shut it off on. That doesn't make any sense at all. And the ones that they shut it off on, I mean, it wasn't where the worst fires had been, it was, Humrock had nothing shut off. And so anyway, I just want to say that that isolation is a reason.
Well, I understand the hardship that it caused the community and certain homeowners. I think we need to kind of stick to the topic that we're on, is the hazard mitigation plan.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Well,
I think it is a good topic.
It's more of a response to protective measure, but
Not all of those nuances can be sorted out here today. If you want to keep it towards the hazard mitigation planning process and how we can fix these types of issues in the future, I think that's the kind of the direction.
yeah, and actually.
Because we're going to run out of time for other items that people might.
The piece that I'm thinking about more than anything, because if the community decides that that's the direction I want to go, how can we minimize the impact? And I think the idea of.
Yeah, we're green valves,
So that's the mitigation stuff we can take. Sorry.
Probably a lot of people won't remember this, but 1985, it was one of the hurricanes, I forgot about Hurricane Glory.
Right.
Fire chief at that time was concerned about the grid being burned out in town, so the order was put out to shut off the entire town. So the entire town was shut off. Then, at that time anyway, the power company said, we cannot turn the town back on until we inspect every house in every neighborhood. So they did the logical thing, they did it along the coastline first because there were no trees there, there's no issues with that. But getting back to my point, hurricanes can cause an awful lot of, I just hope that this mitigation plan is focusing on some of those other issues, because the power was out for almost 2 weeks, you know, good part of this town.
We're not just focused
And
on
all the implications of people needing medical equipment that's powered and everything else, it can be a big, big problem.
big, and just home medical devices, although that, again, it's not necessarily part of the mitigation plan, but it's something I put in every one of the emergency management plans that I write, is that we identify people with home medical devices, just for work purposes.
So we need a stash of 5 or 6 tractor trailer trucks full of portable generators. We can quickly move into an area, plug into the house when it's necessary, and put somebody back online with electricity.
I think, from what I'm hearing, is that, the basic premise has some review, and then if the decision is made to continue with that sort of concept, the implementation portion of it needs more review. Because just like the house being raised above the trees, we don't want to stop one hazard and create another.
The communication between the town and the residents was horrible.
Terrible, just terrible.
They had like 2 hours notice that they were gonna shut the power off. And
I mean, I think they learned their lesson, but,
You know,
There could at least be a reverse 911 or something like that to let people know
And we did, after we conducted the lessons, though, of course, that was the number one lesson. That we need to make a notification to the homeowners well in advance.
well, I think it needs to be done like 6 or 8 months before, saying we may shut this area off. Here's some of the things we suggest: dump valves, different type of insulation, drain your toilets, and a method of what you have to do to be
We
prepared.
notify you well in advance. Perhaps you should be, this is your home, you should be able to be.
Could you just capture that on the board,
yeah.
so that we can, bring that up?
The coastal group did a Map Your Neighborhood program. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's kind of tapping into the resources of your neighborhood, know who's available, what equipment's available.
We have
Communication
electricians,
system
plumbers.
between all of us. We've set up email alerts so that we can send out, if we think it's going to be a bad storm, we can send out our individual groups. And that has helped a lot.
We actually do that in my neighborhood. Maybe because.
But in Humrock, we did the mapping neighborhoods. I have a book, okay, people that had special needs, special equipment. I brought them all to the fire chief at the central station. Everybody else was supposed to be notified. We have our own little fire station in 24 hours a day, okay? None of the firemen were aware of this booklet. I never got one phone call.
Again, I want to make sure we capture it. It's not going to be part of the mitigation plan. I think it's important.
Could be an action plan.
Right.
Yeah.
One other point I'd make is, if you want people to evacuate when you shut off the power like that, and the only way you can keep your house going is with your gas logs, your generators, what are you doing? You're forcing the people then to stay in their homes rather than evacuate. And I think that that's counterproductive to the process that you really want.
I think the takeaway here is that the whole process needs to be reevaluated. Okay. Any other? What about the river?
The river? Okay, I live in Humrock, which is a barrier beach, between the ocean and the South River. The South River, we lost 3 to 4 feet of, we have a public road that's only public 3/4 of the way down. The next section of it is private road, okay? All along the riverbank, we lost at least 3 to 4 feet of river banking, and it's all just washing into the river.
Did you lose that during one event? Or?
During this winter,
Okay.
the trees that were, and the things that were on the side of the road, they've all just fallen down. There's pieces of old, I think when they used to oil the road, clumps of stuff, just all down in the riverbank. It's a disaster, but it's a safety thing now. My husband and I have put barrels all along there. The The kids from Wrexham keep coming through, they steal the barrels. I spend half of my life down there telling them, leave the barrels alone. They've stolen all the cones that we put along there. 2 cars have already gone off the side of the bank. But somebody,
What's the road? Is that
oh, well, it's River Street.
River Street?
By Old Mount, right?
But it goes down to Old Mount, okay? 2 people have already gone off the side of the road because it's so dark at night. Okay, without the barrels or something there, there's no lighting. So it's very easy if somebody is not familiar with the street to go right off into the river.
Yeah, see, I'm looking at, obviously, want to address immediate safety issues. With my mitigation hat on, though, I want to think about how far that road is going to move without...
We're not gonna have, that's our only access road to 36 houses.
We want to, that's something...
So we have no other means of getting in and out of our houses if any more of that road deteriorates. And even the fire department has said they used to come down daily and circle around so they know where all the various houses were. They won't do that anymore because the weight of the truck, they're afraid is going to erode a little bit.
So we definitely want, that's
like
wait a minute. You weren't going to bring that up until I...
Well, I have to tell you, I have had numerous meetings and conversations with Kevin Caffey at DPW, with Sean, with Pat Gallivan at Conservation, and nobody seems concerned because where it extends to, it's a private road, and so the residents should be responsible. Now, I don't feel as though we should be responsible for the riverbank, and it's, the riverbank is eroding our road. You see what I'm getting at? And so then I thought maybe the South River watershed would be concerned because all this pollution is going into the river that's washing down. But nobody is concerned. Kevin and I came up with a plan, okay? There is also a section, if you went down on the beach, just before where the public road ends, okay? There was a drain in the middle of the road, which actually sunk in. He can tell you, they had to lift it up, bring it back up to the surface. You stood on the riverbank and looked under, the whole road was undermined. So that whole road was gonna give way, even the public section of it. But one of my neighbors cleaned out her driveway and dumped sand down there. So I had somebody, an engineer from one of the construction companies, come and look at it, and they told me unless I dug all the sand out, they couldn't see the damage. So I said, I'm gonna dig the sand out. We came up with a plan, okay? You can buy armor rocks, they said, and you buy the netting. You put the armor rocks in netting, and there's a machine that pushes it under, okay? But we're talking $6,000-7,000 maybe to do a small section, and the neighbors don't believe that they should be responsible for paying for it.
These are the kind of things that we have these public meetings for, so that we can hear that there was frustration with the previous action, or the frustration with it.
I don't know if this has been talked about before, but when you were talking about the flooding and not being able to get out, I know there are some signs up in the town, but I wonder, you know, in today's age or something with solar or whatever, if we couldn't have signs that when we have storm events for people, that the signs do flash that this water may cover this road, and just, or put up some of the portable signs we have to notify people they may want to think about evacuating. You know, because I'm thinking about like in North Situate, Minot there, once that's all closed off, it's closed off. And you have people who may be new to the neighborhood who don't know what's going on. And so some kind of signage that, I mean, I've seen them in other parts of, you know, areas, but...
We're starting to go, the world is starting to go finally with more reflectivity with signs that can be seen during bad weather.
Are you interested in some suggestions of some simple things that can be done to mitigate flooding?
Sure.
All right. I assume you went down Oceanside Drive, that's one of the years where they were reconstructing the seawall, the so-called Bronze Project, but there was a drainage system that was put from that basin out to the beach, maybe around 1970. It was maybe a 2-foot outfall. It didn't work for very long because it was damaged by does work to the point where after a major storm like we had this one 2 years ago, the drain culverts on the street need to be cleaned. And teenagers in that area know probably better than anybody else where those drains are located. And they'll go out there at their waders and they'll take their rakes and they'll clean out the drain and it will help get the water out quicker. What I would suggest is that the town put up some indication of where these drains are located along the street. You can imagine when it's totally flooded, it's almost impossible to find anything. And if they were better marked, then that would be something that would be, it'd be easier to clean. The town really ought to be looking at a better drainage system than that, because that water can sit there days on end.
Can you give us
Oceanside Drive up around 6th Avenue.
Oceanside 6th?
That's the area that helicopters.
Oceanside.
Yeah, if you saw pictures of Situate with the flooding and people running around in boats, that's where I'm talking. And it's not necessary. When that tide goes down, that water should be sucked out of there pretty quick.
We find habitually in coastal areas that some of the biggest problems is the ability of the waters that they.
Right.
It's not, water's gonna come in, but given it the ability to, working with one community, there's another coastal community, they have no issues with sea level rise, they know, the topography of the town, the increase in elevation from the coast to where the town actually starts is significant. So, they're good for a number of years from coastal. What gets them is their drainage system can't handle the heavy rain.
There's another drainage system on Jericho Road, and there's really two basins on this area we're talking about, up by the north end of Oceanside Drive and on the south end. And the south end is drained out to Situate Park. The town got some federal money and they put in this drainage system, about $250 million worth of work. And in one storm, I think it was storm in 2013, it didn't work well at all. It was all plugged up, it had to be looked at. The gates. And the storm this past winter, it worked better. It's a maintenance issue.
Right, now, actually, we had a conversation about that, the whole issue with the gates and also with the dumping of fish guys and that's in the system.
Are these free-flowing drainage pipes, in other words, it's a matter of gravity and
Well, one on Jericho Road is more complex. It's got these floats in it that kind of regulate them.
Are there such things as macerator pumps that chew up the debris and get it out?
There are, I don't know, to what size and what expense. Yeah, they do have that, but even then, I don't think that's exactly right. There's grinder pumps that will chew up a certain amount of waste, but how much, I know they exist, I don't know to what size and what capacity, and whether or not they're feasible. They're also power driven, so.
So that brings me to another point that's been brought out in we did a public information report. So CRS is part of the CRS community. We have to do outreach and education, and part of that now we had to write a report. And one of the items that came up as far as education purposes go is to educate the community about their debris. That means the things that you leave out underneath your home and around your house. If you know you're not going to be there after you leave for the summer, taking your items and storing them in a safe place out of the way of the flooding area, that would be most helpful to some of these issues that we have with the clogging of our drainage system. It makes it really difficult to go out and try to remove some of the items that are clogging it if it's part of your system, and some of them are actually dangerous. So if it's your gas grill and you have a tank, we have no way of knowing if that tank is full or empty, but we have to go out and administer the help. So then also hazardous materials, leaving gasoline cans around, so when you're going to do a mow the lawn or whatever your purpose is of having those types of items underneath your house or around your house, all of those items are really important to make sure that they're tucked away in a safe place out of the flood zone.
Or secure.
Or secure, so that it's not going to become part of the problem. So that was one of the items that was brought out, is that we need to do more as a community to outreach to the public, that we also need your help in making sure that you do these items. So thank you for providing me.
Floating out from underneath your house, the damaging the house across the street.
This winter, we had chairs, cushions, fishing equipment, washing through our windshield.
I had.
Yeah, we had pieces of
There was a big
decks.
education,
Yeah.
and that, it's really just an education.
Yeah.
Did you have something, sir? Oh,
Just listening.
I wanted to mention one other thing about where the drainage areas are. One of the big storms, when they hit, if we've had a lot of really cold weather and they're very frozen, you really have no ability for the water to go anywhere because it's solid ice and it could go down 3-4 feet into the ground, and that becomes a huge problem. So what would normally, if there was no cold, would be open so you could drain into it. But I think that that's a definite consideration on the storm events, particularly like down in our area, down there around Oceanside, because it was very frozen for one of the events and getting the water out. The other thing was flapper valves. Those are, to me, really important, that we have those working on the pipes to keep the water from coming in and not and stopping it in that manner.
That was another item I was talking about, so that's a good point, and
We have about 6-8 minutes before we begin to wrap it up, so anybody who hasn't had an opportunity to make a suggestion.
When Dave formed our beach association group, we had a joint meeting with some member of the fire department. I think it was after the storm where we looked, there were a lot of trees and we lost power in town. And we asked about a gas station in town that had a generator so that we who had gas generators could go and buy gas. And at the time, there was no gas station in this town.
Can I just follow up with that?
It's
I
fine
did.
now.
I was just getting gas the other day up at Scottsdale on 3 a.m. by Manlock Road.
Yeah.
I asked him a question, do you guys still have a generator? He said, yeah, we're the only one in town.
Yeah, he was quoted, I think, at the time we had asked the question.
Right.
So there is one.
Yeah,
But
well,
that's a really important point because, and back in these hurricanes, in 1985, people were desperate for ice.
Yes.
Gasoline for their
Yes.
generators.
Great
And
point.
nobody had that.
no, and I can just say, back to the ice storms that knocked out Central Mass. I run my house off of my, I used to have a mini. My minivan is much better. I kept my house up to the minivan and I run. Well, my minivan gets much better gas mileage, like, but it can much better. So my neighbors were all running out of gas in their generators before we could get off the streets to get more gas. But my van was still running. So, you know, it's, you know, we find, what's that?
Running your house on 12 volts, we get a converter.
I get a power of it. So I can run the expenses, the refrigerator.
Right.
But, you know, I guess my point there, you know, looking at the situation, and we found out after Sandy, all the gas in the area down in New York, New Jersey, I got sent down to Long Island after Hurricane Sandy. No gas. Nobody had the pump down. In some states, they require you to have backup generators. Not up here, because that's not something. So identifying those, I'm actually working on the state evacuation plan for Rhode Island, and one of the things I'm doing is identifying gas stations that do have generators and will agree to stay functional during an evacuation.
But the one gas station he's talking about with the generator is quite a distance from our home. It's
Right, so
almost
you
like
wanna make
little
sure
gas
that-
and
Right.
line. So we need something over closer to us.
The other thing was,
Zone 3A. What's the name of the gas station?
Scassalonis.
They just changed ownership, but maybe
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
3A gas.
They've always been on the special.
I think it was Hurricane Irene when the power went out. I think we were out for 4 days. And there was no ice to be had in the town. Town of Marshfield, through their supermarket, Roche Brothers, arranged to have a truckload of ice come into the community, and they gave it away to the residents. There was no provision in Situate to get ice whatsoever.
This, again, we're straight out of the mitigation plan, but I will say that public-private partnerships are key to community recovery, response and recovery. The number one supplier of recovery goods following Hurricane Katrina was Walmart. They have the best logistical system of any, and now others are copying it. They copied this from the military from Desert Storm. They were able to divert trucks on moment's notice, have go to depots, switch off loads, get the right product, moving in the right direction. Home Depot now does the same thing, Lowe's does the same thing, and a lot of the major supermarket chains that have some level of capability of doing it. Roche Brothers is a much more localized supermarket, but that ability to access the public, it was so taboo for years for communities to have pre-existing agreements with the private sector, because it was seen as daily.
I think that mentality is still around.
It is, and it needs to be broken down, because we need to be able to reach out from a preparedness perspective beforehand, reach out to those vendors and those private sector partners, and bring them to the table. National Grid is at the table all the time for a lot of the projects that I work on. We ended up forming teams with National Grid, National Guard soldiers, DPW guys, and Mass DOT workers to go out and do roving and cable and telephone, getting them to go all together to go from spot to spot doing recoveries. The only challenge that we couldn't overcome was getting the cable, telephone, and electric guys to share a bucket truck, so that we could spread the resources out further. I'm going to blame the unions. I don't know really if it was the unions or not. They would not let them work on another company's truck that they hadn't inspected and certified.
Some of the things to think about, it deals with the electrical problems and how things have to be inspected before they can be turned back on. And people who know probably as much about the code as anybody else would be the electricians. There ought to be some sort of provision within their license to deputize.
It exists.
We do that.
I just start taking my words.
We do that, and
Wait, that's my angry, hey, I still need my angry guy.
Deputize them, use them in.
Yeah, no, you're right, absolutely.
Nancy said.
Same for builders.
Yeah,
They have guys for builders.
and what we did discuss is that
Okay, yeah, no, it's-
we would need to have more available to us, so looking outside our community, looking further across our.
Outside your impact
Get
area.
people in to help us kind of mobilize more quickly.
Because you don't want to take an electrician whose home is also damaged and, ask them to leave. Hey, your families, don't worry about that. Come take care of everybody else. So, we want to, and there's ways to set those systems up, but they need to be done well in advance. You can't, it's one thing for National Grid to call their sister utilities in Arkansas and have them send up 100 trucks. It's another thing to get an electrician from,
Yeah.
any other mitigation? You need some, you need to hire me to do emergency preparedness. Just because of all the lessons we're getting out of this.
Absolutely.
But for mitigation actions, anything else?
Anything else?
I really appreciate the comments, the feedback. I appreciate the honest, straight up feedback. I learned something in every one of these. I've been doing this for a number of years. And I learned something in these meetings. I don't come to your community to make pretend that I come from your community. I didn't grow up in Situate. I was a 16-year-old when I come down here to have a few beers. Drinking age was only 18 then, so I wasn't too late. But I know the area, but I told you, I don't live through your storms. I watch your storms on cable,
as do our friends and neighbors and relatives around the country.
Exactly.
And that's the same,
I didn't say that.
Yeah, so again, I appreciate this feedback. Don't stop now. If there's more feedback that you have, this is an ongoing, continuous process. You can get me through the town, get me, that might not be the way I want to go there. You can get information to me through the town. If you have questions, on home, suggestions, ideas, even stuff, like we've taken a lot of notes here on stuff that, quite frankly, has nothing to do with the mitigation plan, but we're going to pass all those notes out. Because I've never been to a place where, if you bring it up, it's a concern that the town needs to consider. You're a citizen, the town needs to consider it. So whether or not it has to do with my plan or another plan, I always like to make sure we report them and pass them on to the town.
Thank you.
Thank you. Also, thank Peter and Chelsea for coming and for putting this presentation on for us and talking to you about the hazard mitigation plan and all the other items that were presented to him tonight. They're all important, every single one of them, and I agree with you, Doris. So we're going to take all that information back, the things that have to do with the hazard mitigation plan will go into the plan, and the other items will, be brought back to the town, and we'll discuss it with the town as well. Because we'll have a team meeting. We have a staff team that are working on this plan. We have input from the chief of the fire department, the police department, DPW, planning department, Laura Hallbottle, she's here tonight. She's a big part of this. Also, Neil Duggan from the building inspectors department, and conservation. And of course, the town administrator and the selectmen as well are all in support of that.
And I'd like to add that I think the town is very fortunate to have you.
Just one more bureaucratic thing. If you didn't sign in on your way in, there's sign-in sheets out there, please sign in, because that's going to help the town demonstrate that I didn't just make all this up. Not that any consultant would ever do that.
Hey,
We have another public meeting coming up.
instead of using the National Guard, why don't you use the real army?
Meeting coming up on September 1st is on the North Situate Beach project. It's part of the permitting phase, so please feel free to come. Same location, 6 to 8. All right. September 1.